Pistol stabilizing braces. They're popular. Millions of people have them, but soon federal regulations are changing.
After months of questions surrounding the ATF search warrant that led to a deadly shootout.
Statement, the U.S. senators say the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms answered their questions about body cams.
Well, tonight, multiple Arkansas sheriff's offices are pushing back against a new gun policy from the ATF.
But when you bypass that format, which is exactly what the ATF has done, you get all kinds of bad things.
A pistol stabilizing brace allows users to strap their gun to their forearms or place them on their shoulders for more stability.
ATF rule changes. All right, let's dive into the wild world of ATF rule changes and why some folks are raising their eyebrows. The ATF, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, decides to shake things up a bit. They're tweaking rules left and right, but here's the kicker. Some folks are saying they're doing it without the green light from Congress. It's like changing the recipe for your grandma's famous cookies without asking grandma first. Take, for instance, the saga of pistol braces. These nifty little contraptions were originally designed to help disabled veterans shoot more comfortably. But suddenly, the ATF flips the script and says, now these braces are a no-go unless you want to risk becoming a felon.
Pistol stabilizing braces. They're popular. Millions of people have them, but soon federal regulations are changing.
It's to ATF's rule on firearms with attached stabilizing braces, or what we call the pistol brace rule.
Support Senator Kennedy's resolution of disapproval of the ATF's stabilizing brace rule.
Redefines these stabilizing braces as a short-barreled rifle.
Talk about a plot twist. Imagine thinking something's totally fine for 12 years only to have the rules change on you out of the blue. And it's not just pistol braces getting the makeover treatment. There's also the issue of firearm form errors. Now, we don't know about you, but paperwork isn't exactly everyone's idea of a good time. But imagine making a little oopsie on the form, like forgetting to dot an I or cross a T, and suddenly you're in hot water. The ATF saying even minor slip-ups could land you in trouble, with folks losing their licenses. It's like playing a game where the rules keep changing and nobody's giving you the playbook.
Well, tonight, multiple Arkansas sheriff's offices are pushing back against a new gun policy from the ATF.
New federal regulations for pistol stabilizing braces were announced just last week.
A pistol stabilizing brace allows users to strap their gun to their forearms or place them on their shoulders for more stability.
ATF is putting out new regulations saying if you add this onto a gun, you're going to have to register it with the government.
This ruling has effectively, and for now at least, killed ATF's pistol brace rule.
But perhaps the most frustrating part of all this is the lack of transparency and accountability. It's like trying to solve a mystery with no clues. People are scratching their heads, wondering how and why these rule changes are happening without Congress giving the thumbs up. It's leaving folks feeling like they're in the dark, with no way to hold anyone accountable for what feels like rulemaking on the fly. The ATF's rule changes are causing quite the stir, with accusations flying left and right. It's like a roller coaster ride of uncertainty, and folks are hoping for some clarity and accountability sooner rather than later. Impact of rule changes. Let's talk turkey about how these rule changes are really hitting home for firearm owners. It's not just about reading some new fine print. We're talking real-life consequences that can turn someone's world upside down. First off, imagine you're just an average Joe or Jane trying to follow the rules, but suddenly the game changes. Maybe you unknowingly break one of these new regulations, like having the wrong kind of brace on your pistol. Next thing you know, you're staring down the barrel of some serious consequences. We're talking about losing your livelihood, your ability to put food on the table, or even winding up with a shiny new felony on your record.
Who have stabilizing braces attached to their handguns could face federal charges if they don't comply with new regulations.
They're a popular item. They sell hundreds a year. And for some guns, they require the braces on their shooting range.
Those who use an attachment called a brace stabilizer will now have to register their weapon with the government.
The ATF's new regulations say these braces convert pistols into short-barreled rifles.
It's like trying to navigate a minefield blindfolded, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But it's not just the immediate fallout that's got folks up in arms, it's the whole vibe of fairness and clarity that's missing. You're trying to play by the rules, but it feels like the rule book keeps changing on you. It's like trying to hit a moving target with a blindfold on. How are folks supposed to know what's what when the rules seem about as clear as mud?
Well, tonight, multiple Arkansas sheriff's offices are pushing back against a new gun policy from the ATF.
New federal regulations for pistol stabilizing braces were announced just last week.
A pistol stabilizing brace allows users to strap their gun to their forearms or place them on their shoulders for more stability.
ATF is putting out new regulations saying if you add this onto a gun, you're going to have to register it with the government.
This ruling has effectively, and for now at least, killed ATF's pistol brace rule.
And let's not forget the ripple effect these changes can have. It's not just about one person, it's about whole communities feeling the squeeze. Maybe it's a small business owner who relies on selling firearms to put food on the table. Seriously, they're facing so much red tape that they're forced to shut their doors for good. Or maybe it's someone who just wants to exercise their rights responsibly, but now they're second-guessing every move they make, afraid of accidentally stepping on some new rule. The impact of these rule changes goes way beyond just checking some boxes on a form. It's about real people, real lives, and real consequences. And until there's some clarity and fairness in how these rules are handed down, folks are going to keep feeling like they're walking a tightrope with no safety net in sight. Brian Malinowski's fatal encounter. Let's zoom in on a real-life tragedy that's shining a harsh spotlight on the actions of the ATF. Meet Brian Malinowski, just an ordinary guy until one fateful morning turned his life into a nightmare. It's the crack of dawn, and Brian's jolted awake by the sound of his front door caving in. Next thing he knows, he's staring down the barrel of a loaded pistol, facing off against ATF agents who've come knocking with a search warrant. Brian didn't see it coming. There was no warning, no heads up that his world was about to be turned upside down. It's like waking up to a nightmare with no chance to hit the snooze button.
After months of questions surrounding the ATF search warrant that led to a deadly shootout. A House panel heard from the lawyer for the family of the former airport director.
ATF affidavit said the reason for the search warrant on Brian Malinowski was because he was selling guns without a license.
And then things go from bad to worse. Shots ring out, chaos erupts, and before anyone can blink, Brian's lying on the ground, fatally wounded by the very people who were supposed to serve and protect. It's a tragedy that's left a community reeling, asking how things could have gone so horribly wrong. Critics are pointing fingers at the ATF, accusing them of excessive force and a lack of warning that turned a routine search warrant into a fatal encounter. But Brian's story isn't just about one man's tragic fate, it's about the bigger picture of what's going on behind closed doors at the ATF. It's raising some serious questions about their practices and procedures, leaving folks wondering if there's something rotten at the core. Because if this could happen to Brian, who's to say it won't happen again to someone else? So yeah, Brian Malinowski's fatal encounter isn't just a cautionary tale, it's a wake-up call. It's shining a harsh light on the actions of the ATF and sparking a much-needed conversation about accountability and transparency in law enforcement. Because until we get some answers and some real change, tragedies like Brian's will keep happening, and no one deserves to wake up to that kind of nightmare. Critique of ATF tactics. Let's take a closer look at the tactics being used by the ATF and why some folks aren't exactly giving them a gold star for their efforts. Pre-dawn raids, SWAT teams swooping in like something out of an action movie, it's the kind of stuff that'll make your heart race just thinking about it. But here's the thing, folks are starting to wonder if these dramatic tactics are really necessary. Sure, we all want to feel safe and secure, but do we really need to kick down doors before the sun's even up? And then there's the issue of force. It's like the old saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. But critics are raising their eyebrows at the level of force being used by the ATF. I mean, we're talking about people's lives on the line here. Shouldn't there be some kind of checks and balance to make sure things don't spiral out of control?
We'll begin the hearing with opening statement. Chair recognizes himself. Government's not supposed to change the rules without a vote of Congress.
To Brian Malinowski's home, they had a search warrant as part of an investigation into the Little Rock Airport directors.
Because we're talking ATF and because we're talking firearms who are doing all those things, this is basically a licensing dispute.
Statement, the U.S. senators say the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms answered their questions about body cams.
But perhaps the most troubling part of all this is the lack of accountability. It's like the ATF is operating in a vacuum with no one keeping an eye on what they're up to. Take, for instance, the use of body-worn cameras. In this day and age, you'd think it'd be standard practice for law enforcement to use them, right? But nope, not the ATF. It's like they're playing by their own rules and nobody's holding them accountable. But here's the silver lining. Folks aren't just sitting back and letting this slide. There's a groundswell of calls for increased oversight and accountability mechanisms. It's like saying, hey, we're watching you and we expect better. Because at the end of the day, we all want to feel safe and secure, but not at the expense of our rights and freedoms. So here's hoping the ATF listens up and starts playing by the rules, the ones we all agreed on. Video evidence. All right, let's talk about the power of video evidence and why it's got folks calling for some serious action. You've got footage of ATF agents gearing up in a Walmart parking lot, getting ready to execute a search warrant. It's like watching a behind-the-scenes glimpse of what goes down before the action starts. But there's no body-worn cameras in sight. It's like the ATF forgot to hit record on the most important part of the show. And that's got folks scratching their heads and asking some tough questions.
Federal agents did not wear body cameras during the incident. This comes from U.S. Senators Tom Cotton and John Bozeman.
But lawmakers say there are a few things they want answered after hearing the Malinowski attorney's testimony.
But when you bypass that format, which is exactly what the ATF has done, you get all kinds of bad things.
It's a alleged violation that the definition is subjective.
In this day and age, shouldn't it be standard practice for law enforcement to use body cams? It's like having an extra set of eyes on the scene, making sure everything's on the up and up. But without that footage, it's like we're missing a piece of the puzzle, left wondering what really went down behind closed doors. But here's where things get interesting. People aren't just sitting back and letting this slide. Nope, they're saying, hey, we want answers. There's a chorus of calls for a thorough investigation into the ATF's practices and incidents like Brian Malinowski's tragic demise. It's like shining a spotlight on the dark corners of law enforcement and saying, we're watching you. Because at the end of the day, transparency isn't just a buzzword, it's a cornerstone of trust. And without it, well, let's just say it's hard to have faith in the folks who are supposed to be keeping us safe. So here's hoping that video evidence sparks some real change and that the calls for investigation lead to some much-needed answers. After all, we deserve to know the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.